Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission. Can everyone present hear me? If you can you raise your hands, please? Thank you. This evening meeting is held in person here in the Council Chamber, but it's also being broadcast live via YouTube. In order to maintain transparent decision-making and following the requirement to adhere to the coronavirus 19 related social distancing and minimal travel advice, our witnesses tonight are coming online via Zoom. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting via Newham's YouTube on the Council YouTube page and attend in person in limited numbers. For this meeting, we will be aided by Richard Plummer and Janine Jenkinson to assist councillors and officers with the technology. Please, can everyone physically present continue to wear their mask until they are invited to speak? After you have finished speaking, please replace your mask. May I ask members to note that they must raise their hand in order to indicate that they wish to speak. This can be your physical hand if you're present, or your virtual hand if you are on Zoom. I also would like to remind members, if a vote is taken, it will be by way of raising your hands, like so, in order that the clerk can capture it on screen. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. First item, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, so I've received apologies from Councillor Siddiker, Councillor Tahura, Councillor Tripp, who is online, Councillor Verdi, who's also online. And yes, that's it.
So because they're online, they are present, so it will be recorded as an electronic presence. Okay. Thank you. Is there any declaration of interest? Any member wishing to declare any interest? The clerk will note that there is no member wishing to declare any interest. Minutes of our meeting held on the 14th of July, 2021. I move that these are accurate and recordings of the meeting held on the 14th of July, 2021. Do I have a seconder to that?
Wasn't there?
Chair. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Hudson, second. But thank you very much. Now, colleagues and for members of the viewing public, we have three substantive items on our agenda this evening, namely, children's services improvement. That will be item 3 on our agenda. Item 4 on our agenda is special educational needs and disability and provisions performance in Newham. That's item 4. And item 5 is the brighter futures, direction of travel and performance. Those are the three substantive items. I do recognize them.
Sorry, Chair. Just to go back to the minutes item, there were the recommendations from the informal meeting in September, which would also need to be agreed. So there's a series of recommendations which were made, which would need to be agreed formally at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so before we take item 3, so if Sarah and her team being readiness for item 3, we just like to also agree the recommendation agreed on the 22nd of September 2021, which can be formally adopted and actioned upon following this meeting. Is that agreed?
Chair, where are those recommendations in the papers?
They're
Page
in
19.
Oh, sorry.
So they'll be in the notes of the individual
Page
items.
19 at the end of the minute. At the end.
No, that's right, okay.
Thank you. Okay. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for bringing that to my attention. We now move to item 3, children's services improvement. In this item, we will look to assure ourselves that there is continual monitoring of the ongoing improvement and to ensure requirements are fulfilled and sustained, and also ensure that we monitor the progress on practice improvements within social work and ensure that required area of improvements are being met. I am therefore delighted to welcome Councillor Lewis, Officer Tim Aldridge, Ali Omar, and Emma Cockerell. And Sarah and Tim, over to you and your colleagues. You have 5 minutes if you have any opening statements to make.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're also joined by Claire Lawton as well. And if you will indulge me just slightly, Chair, before I hand over to Tim for his 5 minutes, I think it would be, well, I think we ought to have a moment's reflection on child Arthur, whose stepmother and father were charged today with his murder, and that no matter how good children's services are, and Birmingham are good, it can happen anywhere, and how important it is that we know that our children are kept safe. So I'd just like us to note that, because it was an absolutely appalling act.
Thank you, Sarah, for bringing that to our attention, and colleagues. Is that noted? Yeah. Thank you. It's noted, and the clerk will then note it in the minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll now hand over to Tim, because I don't want to waste the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Ruiz. Thank you, Chair. This is one of the regular Children's Services Improvement updates to the committee. You'll see you've got a variety of papers in the pack, which includes a summary document, a selection of key performance indicators, a letter from Ofsted in terms of the September monitoring visit, a summary of quality assurance, and a glossary of terms. Clearly we are at an advanced stage in our improvement work in Newham. We have travelled a very significant distance since the March 2019 inspection, and now we're moving on to the final straight in our improvement journey ahead of a full re-inspection, which will take place at some point next year. So significantly, the September monitoring visit letter marks a key point in our improvement work. If you read the letter, it demonstrates there has been significant progress and a real strengthening of social work practice across the children in care and leaving care areas. We are absolutely aware there's still more work to do. The report states that there's still challenges in relation to recruitment and the workforce, but I'm pleased to say we are making strides forward in that area as well, and happy to answer any questions about workforce and workforce stability. We also are doubling down on our focus on 3 key areas of improvement, which is the quality of case recording, the quality of planning, and the quality of supervision. And we're making progress in each of those areas. I am holding a fortnightly meeting with the heads of service responsible for the 4 key areas of social work. And at each of those meetings, I'm asking for assurance that improvement activity is progressing and that there is sufficient quality assurance and monitoring of the standards of practice. So we expect a further monitoring visit, likely now because we've got the SEND inspection next week, that monitoring visit is likely to be in early next year. And then a standard ILACS inspection, which is likely to be about 3 months after that. So we are on course. We've got more work to do, and we need to keep a very firm grip. And we are also looking at further key areas of improvement to give us the best chance to improve our grade when we have that judgment inspection. Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just for guidance to the committee, we have the Austin monitoring letter, which we can, team would take questions on, and we also have some performance data in front of us. So I'm over to the committee. And do I recognize anyone on the person?
I'm happy.
We have Councillor Peppiat. Is there anyone else? Yes, Councillor Whitworth, and I haven't seen anyone. Yes, and Councillor Tripp. So we take them in that order, and then we go in the next round after that. Councillor, over to you.
Sarah or Tim, I don't mind who answers really. It's on the number of children subject to child protection plans. If you could look up I know you've got it in front of you and it's in your heads because you're capable people who know it off by heart. You'll have known that you'll have seen obviously that the numbers in child protection plans have gone down significantly. What would be your analysis of why that has happened? I've got some ideas, but I'd like to hear from Sarah and from Tim about why they think that's gone down so significantly in the last 6 months.
Are we taking these as a group or are we taking them one by one?
Well,
up to you how you want to. I mean, up to you how you want to answer. I don't mind who answers it. Is what I'm really saying. It's not directed at either Tim or Sarah. It's whichever of you wants to answer.
Yep, I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sure Emma might want to add something if she feels I've missed something. So we've carried out some very significant focused work on children subject to child protection plans, both those who've been subject to child protection plans for over 12 months and also those who are new to a child protection plan. We have got a clinical team of social workers supporting social work practice, and there is a project looking at the support and intervention that we offer to those children and their families subject to plans. The aim is to ensure that social work working with those families is purposeful, so clear about what it's trying to achieve, is planned, has a clear strategy and approach to deliver support, and is focused on the key things that are relevant to that family at that point in time. And what we've seen is that although we are still getting a similar rate of children becoming subject to a child protection plan, we're seeing an increase in those plans that are closing. Now, the reason why is there's more than one answer. There's been some really focused work on those that have been subject to plans for a long period of time. And that has led to a number of those children either stepping down to a lower level of intervention in the Child in Need service, or stepping up into a public law outline, which is a pre-legal proceedings piece, which really is giving parents very clear message that unless they make significant changes, we will initiate care proceedings. And the second area is those children who are new to child protection plans. And really the hypothesis was it the case that because you have to make a decision quite quickly as to whether or not you take the family to a child protection conference, was there sufficient time and effort to fully engage those families at an early point in time, and did the family have a chance to really understand the concerns and understand what was required of them? And for some families, because there's often been a traumatic event or a significant life change, preceding a child protection conference, often families aren't in a position to fully engage in the offer of support early on. So by really engaging and trying new ways of communicating and working with families in that first 6 months, we found that we've been able to step more families down to child in need plans. But there have also been some families where very quickly we've realised actually, despite intensive interventions, they need to step up to a public law outline. So there's further work to analyse that trend and to see if that trend continues. But what we're seeing is a reduction in the duration of children on child protection plans.
Yeah, Tim, I understand that. Thank you for that. I mean, that I understand. It's still within the bounds of what's the broad structure of the statistical analysis over the last 5 years. So it's still within that cohort, as it were, but it's getting towards the bottom end of it. Do you think the risk assessment that is being done now is at an appropriate level? Because obviously there's always a concern that you're closing down cases and the risk then goes up. And looking at the dips that we've had in performance on these matters over the last 4 years, the two dips are the two areas where we've perhaps got into a bit of trouble in this particular department, having been involved with it for many years. So I'm sure you've got the risk perfectly right. But do you feel that within the department the risk is now suitable for getting that right? Because actually things can go wrong if people are too quick to close things down.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a really, really good question. And I think, I would never be complacent. I think we always need to keep an eye on whether we're getting those risk judgments right. What I would say is there is a much, much enhanced approach to thinking about risk and how we manage risk through the relationships we form with our families. There's never such a thing as eliminating all risk. We all know that. We have to live with risk, but we've offered over 200 consultations to social workers in the last 3 months to look at the risks that they are working with and managing. And I don't think in Newham for a long time have we had a more supportive framework around social work decision making and risk management. So there's always room for improvement, you would be foolish to suggest that there aren't risks out there, because there always will be. But I'm very confident we have strengthened social work risk assessment significantly since 2019.
Any more supplementary?
Not on that one, I've got.
Thank you, Chair. Care leavers have a role in shaping their pathway plans. I'd be interested to know what is the extent of their involvement and how they contribute to shaping the plans for their future.
Emma?
Thank you, Chair. So the whole principle of planning with young adults is upon sort of collaboration and co-production. So the young people are very much involved and engaged in their own planning, because that's part of their protection and kind of moving towards understanding what their own goals and aims are. We've introduced some new tools to help support that, which have been really positively received by some of our care leaders, and particularly our Care Leavers Forum, through the use of the Outcome Star. So and that is a particular tool and methodology for understanding what a young person's own goals and aims are, and then being able to build a tailored bespoke plan around those. So looking at kind of key elements of their life in terms of housing, stability, sort of economic well-being, emotional well-being, and addressing kind of those key aspects going forward. And each care leaver is assigned a personal advisor who works with them to construct that plan, and then that plan is reviewed and signed off by a manager.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Tripp.
My question was also about care leavers. I noted some of the improvements that are talked about in the report, but I'm also aware that generally outcomes for care leavers nationwide are incredibly poor. And I wondered how we were doing in terms of that, because it occurs to me there's a national average there in terms of what care leavers go on and do. And while that might look superficially reassuring, in actual terms, what it offers for those young people isn't reassuring and isn't really what we want at all.
Thank you. Chair, if I may start, and then Emma might add something supplementary, if that's okay. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Councillor Tripp. What we know is that on the whole, compared to the general population, care leavers' outcomes are poorer. However, if you compare care leavers' outcomes with some of those most disadvantaged young people, that's the group care leavers generally come from in terms of poor early life experiences, they compare more favourably often. Some of the challenges we have in Newham, and we're not alone, relates to relatively late entry into care, and therefore young people have had less time in our care than perhaps some young people from other local authorities. We have, clearly the 2019 inspection demonstrated that service was inadequate at that point in time. There's been huge amounts of investment in that area and some significant service improvements that are reflected in the letter. And one of the things we're really focusing on is employment, education and training outcomes for care leavers, because what we really need to do, absolutely provide the right care for care leavers when they're with us, but absolutely make sure they're prepared to be independent moving forwards. So we've got 2 new education, employment and training officers who started over the summer, and their job is to really focus on improving those outcomes and those pathways for care leavers. And we're starting to see some benefits in terms of better engagement for those care leavers who've been NEET for longer periods of time and who might have complex needs and therefore more barriers between them and achieving better outcomes. But one of the things we can be a bit more proud of is the number of our care leavers who go to university. We're actually at the higher quartile nationally in terms of our care leavers who go on to university. And, to a great extent, that's because of the amazing schools we have in Newham and the great education outcomes that most Newham children have. But again, we're not complacent. There is more to do. There are care leavers we know who require a lot of consistent support in order for them to have improved outcomes. And one of the things we're working really hard on is access to independent tenancies and suitable accommodation, and working very closely with colleagues in housing. And we've got actually 30 new units available coming on stream next year to enable care leavers to move on to independent accommodation. Emma, I don't know if there's anything briefly you want to add.
Before Emma comes in, Tim, Councillor, does Tim response satisfy your question?
It does. Yes, I'd be interested to know what the rate is of our care leavers going to university. I'm sorry if that was in the papers and I've missed it or can't remember it.
That's fine. Councillor Tripp, I will have a look through the papers as we go, and I'll come back to you on that if that's okay.
Tim, because your response satisfied the councillor's question, I won't bring in Emma. Okay, thank you very much. I haven't seen, yes, Councillor Vardy, and I haven't seen anyone else, so then after Councillor Vardy, I would have a go. Okay.
Yeah.
We only have Tim is here for another 10 minutes or so, thereabout. Councillor Vardy.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. And thank you for the update, Tim. Just a quick question. Do we keep a track of the care leavers and where they end up at the end of the day? just so that we ourselves are satisfied that what we've done for them is the very best we can. And as you said rightly, there's a lot more we can do, but obviously there is sometimes when somebody does escape the net, in a sense. Sorry to use that word, but obviously just trying to use in a sense that it makes sense. And more importantly, where those care leavers do go away, is there any way we could sort of say, this is what we've achieved or what they've achieved, and actually celebrate those good points, and not forgetting those who have not celebrated, who have not done great, but we shouldn't forget those as well?
Can I start off on that? Because it's something I actually can answer.
You may.
So, Harbinder, yes, we do keep a track. We know where all of our care leavers are. We have to do regular updates, and they are now being done, I'm very pleased to say. But on the issue of recognising achievement, we are having an event on the 20th, I think, where we're not just celebrating those who have gone to university, but actually every single one of our young people has something that they have achieved, even if it's they haven't been missing for a couple of nights, or they've managed to go to school all week. So we have that event on Monday the 20th, and I think they should all be celebrated, and it's not just those young people who managed to achieve to go to university or further, are sometimes far more significant in their lives.
Chair, can I just come in there? Is that okay?
Yes, okay.
Just to add to what Councillor Ruiz said, which is absolutely right. Sorry, just to answer Councillor Tripp, we've got 9% of our care leavers are at university, which ranks Newham as 18th best in England, where the average is 6%. So that's how we compare. And I think the number's around 56 care leavers at university. Sorry, and then just to add briefly to what Sarah says, we are expecting the care leavers hub called the Cove to open next year. That will be a real focal point of space for young people leaving care to spend time in, and we really want to use that as that launch as a symbolic moment to really celebrate care leavers and their achievements. And we are working up a potential launch event, and we've been speaking with someone this week who's got a track record. He's a care leaver himself, and he's done a lot of work with councils to improve their offer to care leavers and to celebrate their achievements. And we're looking to work with him and to partner with local businesses to really make sure we recognise achievements, and we improve the opportunities and the offers for care leavers in Newham.
Chair, can I indulge in a supplementary, please?
Yes, you may. Briefly.
Chair, just a quick note, carrying on to what Tim said, working with the housing team, do you think that this is an area where we should try to prioritise the care leavers to be higher up the scale on housing or accommodation? I know we've got all the other residents as well, but considering what these young people have gone through, do you think we could do better on that, and do we need to make a stronger case for this?
A brief response, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I would, as Director of Children's Services, I would always say we can do more for our care leavers, but we're already engaged with our housing colleagues looking at our sufficiency strategy. They are working really hard with us to try and prioritise care leavers where they can, but we would always welcome any support to ensure that care leavers are prioritised in whatever area we're looking at. But yeah, I think there's always more we can do as corporate parents to really ensure they get the best possible opportunities.
Yep. Sure. Thank you. Tim, I'll bring you in.
Just a quick question on the care leavers. Do you have any, you said, was it 6% or 9% end up in university? Do you have any data to say where care leavers end up so we can look at it in context?
In terms of end up, do you mean sort of later in life, councillor?
Well, if it's saying people leaving care, obviously a percentage go to university, a percentage will be in work, a percentage may end up elsewhere. So do we have any analysis of that? So I did a quick scan through these papers and I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely, councillor.
On that.
No, thank you for the question, councillor. Yeah, no, and thanks for clarifying. Yeah, no, absolutely. We report regularly on care leavers and the proportion who are in suitable accommodation, the proportion who are in employment, in education and in training, and those who are not. So across up until the age of 21, we monitor those outcomes and where care leavers are at any particular point in time, and certainly we can provide more data and information on that.
Thank you very much. I'd be interested in the ones that are not, because it's just to see if things are working.
Yeah. Thank you. Tim, just for the committee and the viewing public, on page 25, you said there is greater flexibility and presenting the front door in terms of case work that you are getting. So without going into any specific in any details to identify anyone, can you give us a flavor of the complexity that you might be facing in the front door?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Emma if she'll come in to respond to that, please. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. So I think what we are seeing for some children and their families is particularly COVID has added some additional pressures for family life. We're seeing increased numbers of children referred to us in relation to having had experience of domestic abuse and living in households where that is a feature, and certainly increased numbers of children who are presenting with mental health issues, and also parents. So I think those additional factors, and sometimes they come together, is adding to kind of the complexity, but also I think in terms of some of the ancillary services that also have supported children and families during this time haven't been as available. So which has meant that needs have sometimes escalated to the point that statutory social work is required to try and address those needs. So that's something that we are currently reviewing with our colleagues in Brighter Futures in terms of that need to really address kind of the issue of preventative services. And make sure that what we're learning about children's experiences in the front door, we are then able to translate into service provision that happens at an earlier point to stem that need and that escalation of risk.
Thank you. And is the primary cause of this likely to be the COVID pandemic?
I think there were families that already perhaps had underlying vulnerabilities that have been exacerbated by the circumstances of the pandemic. Through the work that we've undertaken through the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, we are in a better place for understanding how the constellation of factors can impact upon families, and in particular the issue of poverty and housing in Newham for some of our children and our families has certainly exacerbated, alongside some of the health kind of inequalities that are also well documented and known about.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask after Councillor Whitworth a question and the initiatives that we have to grow our own social workers and the accommodation of children in care being made to place outside of the borough. So those are the two questions I'm going to come with next. Councillor Whitworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a question about the data given us on page 42 about caseloads by service area. And really, it's a question really to confirm whether I've understood it correctly. We're given an expected range in each service area. I wondered if this was based on the work typically required for a case in each area, and whether the difference in Newham's case is because of the availability of specialists we have. Is that a correct reading of the page 42?
Sorry, Councillor, just finding that page.
Could I just come in on Councillor Whitworth's question, because I think it's a very good question. It's the one I had as well, which is that I think that's a fairly meaningless statistic. Now, I know I'm going to get probably roasted by the officers here, because actually it depends on the size of the casework, size of the case that they're studying. So therefore, having a band there doesn't really tell you. If you've got, you know, an authority with lots of very complex cases, then that's a different scenario to if you've got an authority with lots of very easy cases or simple cases. So, I mean, I think it's a, yeah, exactly. And I think it's a fairly meaningless statistic, but perhaps the officers, I'm playing devil's advocate, could explain why the government and the officers think it's such an important statistic.
Thank you, councillors. I'm going to start off and then I'll potentially invite Emma to come in. Yeah, no, I mean, in essence, we conducted a caseload review, which looked at the case holding capacity, the number of supervisors for social workers, and the volume of work that we had in different parts of the service. And what we did was benchmarked some of those caseloads against other places in London, but also looked at what we thought was a manageable caseload in order for social workers to perform purposeful work. And what we've seen is we have brought those caseloads down overall. The reason it's a range is because there isn't, as Councillor Peppier has mentioned, there isn't a right answer, and it will depend upon the level of experience of the social worker and of the types of cases that they hold. But we do need some way of getting a sort of health check to understand where caseloads are, and they are moving generally in the right direction. There are some discrepancies across different services, and sometimes short-term vacancies, for example, will increase caseloads in particular areas. But what we have seen is in the Ofsted monitoring letter, although they state in some places, I think that's probably the leaving care team, caseloads could be high. They felt for every social worker they spoke to and all the work that they saw, they felt they were at a level that enabled purposeful work to do. So you're absolutely right. They can feel quite meaningless if you just bandy them around without context, but officers have made real efforts to try and get a sense of what would be sensible in different areas and ensuring that the workload is manageable. And that's also about good management. And we've reduced the ratio of supervisor to supervisee in order to ensure that social workers are getting more support and there's more oversight of the work that they're doing.
The caseloads are not heavy according to the expected range. So, but you are happy with the ranges that you've got at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor, we are at the moment. We will keep them under review, but at the moment it's a very significant improvement from 2019.
Thank you. Tim, the authorities try to limit the number of children placed out of borough or further feed into their own counties. And I noted that there's a lack of local accommodation. So how are we fixed in terms of our young people that is placed further field and what are you doing to make certain that we stick to the authorities' guidelines on these?
Thank you, Councillor. You're absolutely right. There are a few measures. So there is a measure of how many children are placed within your local area, and for London boroughs, it is not unusual for the majority of children to be placed outside of your borough, because boroughs are quite small, and some boroughs, for example, it's harder to recruit foster carers in part because of the housing stock.
Because of the interest of time, so the question I'm asking is about how many of our youngsters are being placed for the field, and what is being done to, just because I need to move on.
No, of course, Chair, of course. So in terms of those who are placed over 20 miles, I'm going to ask colleagues just to give me that statistic. I know colleagues are looking for that now. What are we doing though? There's a significant piece of sufficiency work. So we are part of the North East London Commissioning Partnership, which has commissioned 24 care placements in the East London footprint, and 2 new homes opened this week, which enables us to place more of our children in residential care closer to home. And that provision will expand by another 13 beds over the coming year. We're also working on transforming our fostering service, so we're reviewing the rates and the support that we offer to carers. We are reviewing the marketing and the recruitment process with the aim to recruit more carers both in Newham and close to Newham. So there is a significant amount of work that's going on. Emma chairs that sufficiency board, which has a range of different partners. And what we're also doing is reviewing all of those children who are placed far away. Now, some were placed far away because they've got very complex needs, and it's hard to find provision that meets those needs locally. And others are placed far away because of concerns about their safety if they are in or around Newham because of certain gang activity. Councillor, I will get you that data on those placed 20 miles or more away as soon as colleagues give it to me.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask my last question, I'm looking around to see if any of my colleagues have any. If not, I'll come in the last one before I finish with this. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Tripp, and then I will come with my last one.
Thank you. I was quite struck looking at page 34 about placement stability. Although what we're reporting there in terms of 3 or more moves in 12 months is only just over target for the maximum, I was a bit worried about those children who have been in 3 different places or more over 12 months, and wondered if you could maybe tell me a bit about where you think we could get that number to, and also just what you're doing to try to keep an eye on those children, because, you know, from a laywoman's point of view, it strikes me that they're probably some of our most vulnerable children who are probably having the worst time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor. I'm going to invite Emma to respond, but this is all about really good care planning and really good communication between the social work teams and the teams supporting those, the commissioning and the carers. So Emma, over to you.
No, thank you, Tim. So this is something that we monitor quite closely, and we also regularly invite our independent reviewing officer service to help us kind of understand children's pathways and what we're learning from a commissioning and matching perspective, in terms of whether we got the decision right in relation to the placement and the choice at the outset, and understanding the reasons why a placement might have broken down. both in terms of kind of the reviewing the quality of the provider, but also in terms of any particular issues that the child may have that needed to be kind of addressed and supported. So there are various plans in place and developments that we are looking at, including improving the referral process, so the child's profile, so we're more able to appropriately match at the outset to reduce the amount of changes that a child may experience subsequently. We're also looking at how we are monitoring and we are overseeing children's placements, and each child's placement is subject to regular review by the independent reviewing officer. We're working with commissioning partnerships to understand on a North East London basis how we can use our collective buying power in terms of improving placement choice as well. And it's recognised nationally that there are pressures, particularly in the placement of older children. And as Tim cited earlier, we do have a profile where we have older children coming into our care at a later point, and it can be harder to achieve placement stability in respect of older children, because we have less time to form those relationships and in terms of them seeking support. And we are also putting in place a range of support around our foster placements and looking to enhance that in terms of a programme of support linking mental health support more appropriately and targeted to children, older children in placement, to help again kind of prevent placement breakdown. And
can we run that, please? Yeah,
Chair, can I just come back to you on your question earlier?
yes, you may.
Yes, I can confirm that 14% of our children in care are placed more than 20 miles from home, which puts us at 45th nationally, and we're lower than the national average of 16%.
But for the viewing public and for ourselves, we won't know what 14% represent unless we know the number. I think it's from the papers, it was 300 and something. 300 and what is, okay, what's the number again?
So it's 14% of.
Yeah, of what number?
I will come back to you with a.
Yes, I think it's 300 and something, if I remember correctly. If I'm reading
it's over 400 now, but I'd need to check when that percentage was given.
Thank you, Tim, for coming back. Now, in the interest of time, and I know one of my colleagues has a prior appointment, I have a question on your initiative to grow your own social work, but I will put that in writing and you can give us a response, and it will form its way, make its way into the next set of papers that we have, because our time is spent on this particular item. We have 2 more substantive items to deal with. So thank you, Tim, for this segment of the meeting. Thank you, Sarah and colleagues, for attending.
We're still here, Tony.
Pardon?
The next item is ours as well.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, thank you for indulging us. Okay. I will now move on to the other item on the agenda, and that is the send item. I know there's Sarah and other supporting officers for the send item, and I know there's Sarah, there's Tim, there's Amita, Jessica, and Stephanie here to support us in that. Again, the same applies, 5 minutes opening remarks, and then we go into questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm not actually sure if Stephanie's here, but if she's not, it'll because she will be burning the midnight oil as we are in the middle of a send inspection, as the Chair already has been informed of. I will hand over to Anita and Jessica because I believe there is a short presentation.
Right, and so if I give some direction in terms of time, and how long is the presentation likely to last, Jessica?
I mean, I've just got a little bit, but no more than 5 minutes.
Okay, because I'm hoping to conclude this item by 8:30, because we have the Brighter Future item to take.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be brief. I'm taking the papers as read, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Jessica, do you want to just get started then in that case, in terms of just picking out some of those key highlights? But Chair, if I could just very, very briefly just start by giving you some of the context and the profile, really. This paper has called for us to, the request for this paper is really for us to provide an evaluation of the progress so far in terms of that implementation of SEND reform since 2014. And asks for us to really consider that overall effectiveness of agencies. So with SEND, it is really about the partnership, and that partnership is very much made up of the local authority, the clinical commissioning group, providers, health providers, schools, parents and carer that really form that partnership in terms of the SEND journey, and that is all represented on our SEND executive board. We're currently working to the Best for All strategy, which takes us up to 22. And in the process of preparing for the launch of the new SEND and inclusion strategy from 22 to 27. But essentially the current vision reflects our long history of inclusive practice in Newham, where children with special educational needs are supported in inclusive mainstream settings. And that includes our 24 schools with specialist resource provisions, our AP providers, to achieve broadly good educational outcomes. I'm just going to invite Jessica to highlight some of our priorities and areas of progress, which I think is probably the most important, particularly as we are mid-inspection at the moment. It's really important for us to reflect back on our journey so far, think about where we've come, and also about the improvement journey that's ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I mean, I will be brief. We're currently working to our Best for All strategy, which the current slide presents. I don't know who has controls of the slide.
Richard.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. So this just gives a little bit of an overview of the SEND profile. You know, Newham has comparatively high rates of profound and multiple learning difficulties, and also autism. You know, Newham's primary schools have the highest proportion of children with ASD or autism in England. So we do have something of an unusual profile in that respect. If I could have the next slide, please. We have a number of priorities as set out by the executive, and they are supporting timely statutory assessments and working to develop new ways of working, promoting rights and awareness and co-production solutions with children and families. We already have children and families sort of woven through our governance structure. We work really well with them on a strategic level compared to some of our neighbouring boroughs, but we want to ensure that co-production is happening at the earliest possible stage within the EHC pathway. Another priority is strengthening commissioning. Oh, it's all right, carry on. I'll go on to the next one. So just to touch on some of the progress that we've seen against our priorities, we've developed a strategic dashboard. We've launched, with the help of Claire, who we saw earlier, a quality assurance framework, and we've been reviewing the EHC assessment process. So timeliness has improved, for instance, from 5% in April to 76% in September. And I'm here as the new head of SEND, which, you know, between Anita and I gives us a permanent leadership. And further, you know, against our priorities, we have secured some additional funds and been successful in 2 bids, and we've reprofiled our high needs fund deficit recovery plan using investor save approaches to increase funding for early years. The strengths we're building on include high quality health services, a strong culture of parent and carer and peer-led support, and close working with MenCap serves as a really good example of that. There's always more to be done, and we are working in an ongoing way to really listen closely to what parents and carers are telling us, and working within a "you said we did" framework. So really taking on board the recommendations. For instance, parents and carers wanted us to increase children, young people with disabilities and SEND's access to leisure experiences. So we have trialled through Newham Leisure Centre an opportunity for children, young people and families to come and explore sensory equipment and find out more about affordable, accessible sensory equipment that they can bring into their homes, and also trial wheelchair basketball. So as a direct response to what we're hearing, we're doing our best to mobilise and to meet those needs.
Can I stop you briefly? Yeah. In the interest of time, can you round up in 2 minutes, because we take it as read so that members can ask
yeah,
questions.
of course,
yeah,
of course.
You.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we sort of skip on for the strengths we're building on. So identifying need is an area for development. We're working to strengthen our early help offer and our identification of need across age ranges. And the next slide, please. And equally, there's an area for development around DHCs. We need to improve our timeliness, keep on our strong journey of improving quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pepiat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just could you turn to page 9 of your report, 5.4, and perhaps Jessica, you could explain. I was just a bit, just explain that paragraph and those, the fact that we've got many less, comparatively low numbers in primary schools of SEND with specific learning and moderate learning disabilities, whereas we've got higher numbers. It was the comment you made about autism. Why do you think we're so out of sync with the national profile in primary school?
Yeah, I think we have an incredibly strong JSNA, which gives us a good understanding of need in a number of areas. And what I think might be helpful going forward is to have a sort of a supplementary look at that particular area of need so that we can better understand it.
Do you think within those statistics there's a misdiagnosis, or is it the fact that that is the case? I mean, what I can't quite understand is whether that is the profile of SEND children in primary school in Newham, or whether it's misdiagnosis.
Yeah, as I said, I think probably public health would be best placed to look into that. It needs more interrogation. I could hypothesise, but I think it needs interrogation from a public health perspective.
Right. Could you get us, when you finish your inspection, could you get us on explaining that paragraph in terms of more detail to the committee at some stage? That would be great. No hurry on it. The second question I've got is, what do you see the profile going forward in the next 4 or 5 years, looking at the profile of SEND children? I mean, all I'm hearing from schools is it's going to increase. Is that your perception of the numbers rolling forward?
I mean, certainly there has been an upward trajectory of, of particular areas of needs such as autism, and nationally we're seeing an increase in SEND. So it is highly likely that that will also be Newham's experience.
And those are the figures that you fed into your analysis in terms of deficit recovery plan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why do you think that's the case when the overall statistics for number of primary school children in Newham, the latest statistics coming out to the Schools Forum, is going down? Why do you think the proportions are so significantly increasing only in SEND compared to the overall population of primary school students, which are going down?
Again, I think it's just for clarity. So you're asking, why we think the number of children with SEND in Newham will continue to increase.
Well, exactly. You've put in your deficit recovery plan that it's going to increase the numbers. the numbers of primary school children in the latest statistical modelling that's come out for the December meeting of the Schools Forum says that the number of primary school children are going to go down. Therefore, it follows that you're suggesting that the SEND percentage is going to go up significantly within the school population, primary school population, relative to the national figures. What's your rationale behind that assumption?
That is based on the numbers we have at this point. I mean, we'll continue to review each year. EHCs have gone up. The Management Journal noted that since 2019, Newham has seen the largest increase of EHCs nationally. And
I understand that. I mean, partly you're doing more EHCs, so that is bound to be the case. And also the fact that we've had an increasing primary school population. So you would expect the number of SEND children to go up in relation to the increase in the primary school population. That's not going to be the case looking at the latest figures for the next 5 years. What I ask again, why do you think SEND as a proportion of the primary school population is going to go up so significantly?
I'll come in there, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. No, those are our best projections at this point in time. As has already been explained, we've got a recent JSNA which demonstrates a significant need in this area in Newham. Our recovery plan lasts 6 years, as you're aware. We will absolutely need to revisit those figures each year. We've already stated that some of the issues around diagnosis and the needs that are in the population requires further interrogation from public health, and we will continue to revisit those numbers. But as things stand, there is no suggestion that the level of need in the population is going to reduce. In fact, the national trend is increasing, and that's what we're expecting in Newham.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Vardy.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just a quick question. Identifying the sorry, I'm lost for words today.
that time in the evening, isn't it? I think we all are.
No, it isn't. Children with autism, trying to identify those children, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it's difficult within our borough? Because I know from a colleague of mine whose child, he thinks or hasn't been identified that he's got this issue, right? What do you think we can do further to make sure that we're a parent who might think there is something like that in the family, how we can encourage them to come forward earlier rather than later in life?
Yeah. That is one of our key focuses and main priorities, using our early years settings, using the assessment places that we have available, improving our autism pathway, and improving the skill and confidence that we have in our workforce in the broadest possible sense to have conversations with parents and carers at an early stage, because the sooner that we identify those needs, the sooner that we can put support in place and enable children to reach their potential. So that's a big focus of the work, but particularly with autism, given the level of need in Newham.
Chair, can I just ask a supplementary?
Yes, you may.
Jessica, would it be possible for you, not just for me, but for other parents as well, which we can share with other families as well, so like a pathway how it can be done quickly? So if there's a link we can follow, or there's a few lines which you need to email us and the rest of the colleagues as well, so we can move this forward quickly on your behalf as well. And I'm sure members are willing to help with anything they can as well.
Yeah, so sorry, Anita.
No, Jessica, go ahead. I was going to come in on the local offer, but I'll let you carry on.
Just to clarify, so you'd like to sort of see mapped out a pathway with a particular focus on what we're doing in that early identification space. Very, very happy to do that. We have an ASD steering group that's putting a lot of energy into clarifying those pathways and ensuring that they're accessible to parents and carers and local residents. So yeah, with pleasure.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could just come in to add to that, I think Jessica really hit the nail on the head in terms of that area of focus around early intervention. And that's not only for the local authority, that's for the whole partnership to really kind of embed that approach into our practice. And as you say, Councillor, that might be through those messages that you share with your residents as well. So there's a real need to strengthen our local offer and the information that's on our local offer, so that actually anyone who accesses that is very, very clear on the processes from very much earlier on in the process. And as identified as one of the 4 key themes in our independently chaired SEND Commission, early intervention is one of those themes that's been identified by over 80 stakeholders, that it's something we absolutely need to drive forward on improvements on. So really welcome your support with that.
Thank you. I haven't seen any other members who are coming with mine. I'll come back to you. Councillor Whitworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in Newham schools, we did at one point establish full inclusion of SEND provision within mainstream schools, and this is mentioned in the report. And you know, since then we have moved away from full inclusion for practical reasons. But there is one of the values of the full inclusion was social reasons, and I just wondered if in the future are there plans to establish greater social interaction between those in the SEND provision and the mainstream schools, like with formal links and so on. Are there plans to strengthen the contacts actually between the pupils in the SEND provision schools and those in the mainstream schools?
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in first and I'll bring Anita in. Just to say, this is just one of the very significant areas that the SEND Commission is looking at, and the SEND Commission is due to provide a draft report to us sometime later this month. Absolutely, you're right, Councillor, that view of what inclusion meant is something we've revisited. Sadly, because not every child can access education, not every child can enjoy the best opportunities within mainstream education. A number of our children in Newham were sent outside of Newham to specialist provision, and actually we've got one of the lowest numbers of specialist provision in London. We currently have the highest, I think, proportion of children with SEND in mainstream education, and a lot of the provision that we are funding and supporting is resource provision within mainstream settings or annexes of specialist provision within mainstream settings. So we absolutely have a clear commitment to integrating young people with SEND with other children and other settings, and that overall approach to inclusion is a key question that the SEND Commission is trying to answer. But I'll bring Anita in.
Thanks, Tim. Just to add, really, what's currently happening at the moment is that real tangible development of our specialist provision, that continuum of it, so that we're not at one end of or the other of the continuum. So that would include resource provisions, special schools, but notwithstanding our mainstream settings, and kind of still continuing to celebrate the fact of how inclusive Newham schools are. So we're continuing to hold on to the strengths that our schools offer to so many of our children and young people in Newham, but really rethinking what the specialist offer looks like. But your question specifically about how we might continue those interactions, etc., across the ranges of provision, there is just so much expertise across the education community in Newham, and that's something we want to build into our continuum. How do we continue to share that expertise, for example, from one resource provision to a mainstream classroom setting? And so the workforce development is another key piece of that, and therefore an opportunity for that ongoing dialogue and interaction across settings.
Well, thank you. It's good to see that there are these plans. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is just to give us an understanding of what's going on with the SEND and the complexity that you've presented to us. So it was said in the presentation that Newham is experiencing a higher than usual profile of SEND and the complexity. what do you think is the cause of that? I know Concept here talk about, question you about the number is increasing, but the impression I get is not that just that the number is increasing, but the complexity is also a cause of concern. So what do you think is the cause of the complexity?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start and I'll invite colleagues to come in. I mean, we've heard earlier about the impact that COVID has had on on children and young people and their families overall. We know it had a significant impact on children with special educational needs, many of whom weren't able to access a school in person for a significant amount of time. What we also know is the impact the pandemic has had both on patterns of exploitation, but also on the emotional well-being of young people. And I think with many young people, you have a number of different needs. Yes, in terms of learning and communication needs, but also social needs, emotional needs, and vulnerabilities that expose them to risks and harm as well. So I think it's true to say, I mean, working in Newham, there is some real complexity due to a whole range of social and other factors. And that means that the support that we provide through schools and through our casework teams has to be able to understand the range of issues that children and their families might experience. And Anita, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Tim, I think that covers it off really quite well. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. SEND budget is always overspent. Given the increasing complexity and the higher number, where does that leave our budgeting position? Is it likely to significantly increase?
They've not managed to keep it so far.
Would you like me to answer, Chair?
Who's best placed to answer?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I just didn't know if this was time to answer or you were taking other comments from colleagues.
No, it's an answer I'm looking for because we know that the budget is.
I know, sorry, I just heard lots of other talking then. I wasn't sure if you were wanting me to come in then.
Yes,
yeah, no, happy to answer now. That's fine. Yeah, so we've talked already about the high needs funding block and the pressures on the high needs funding block and the deficit that is there currently. We have reviewed our high needs recovery plan, and we brought that to schools funding forum recently. That's a 6-year recovery plan that was absolutely seen as a more realistic approach to recovering. What this requires relates very much to some of the things that we talked about earlier. So it requires us to work more closely with schools to ensure that we are intervening earlier, that we're providing early help and early intervention to meet needs at an earlier point in time. And through meeting needs at an earlier point in time, it's sometimes possible to reduce the level of intervention that's required. But equally, it's about creating more sustainable and sufficient provision in the local area. So sending fewer children out to specialist provision elsewhere. But also we've got a new special school due to open in Newham in 2023. And that again is part of the way in which we will deliver a more sufficient service moving forward. So we have that new reprofile plan. We will continue to review it on an annual basis, as I've said before, but we are satisfied that that plan gives us the opportunity to reduce some of the pressure on that budget over time. We've also seen, as you know, increases in the central government funding for SEND services in Newham, and we absolutely believe that because of past policies of not putting children subject to statements or education, health and care plans, the funding formula for Newham did not sufficiently recognise the level of need in the borough, and that's also another driver for that deficit.
Thank you, Tim. And whatever is what you're doing to address the situation, and thanks to that. The question is, and I suppose it goes without saying that it would affect the budget. Obviously, would it be significantly so, or just moderately so? Which one?
Yeah, so I think I've answered the question, Chair. So we've got a high needs fund recovery plan. I'm content that's in place. We're reducing the deficit this year. We're due to reduce the deficit over the following 5 years too.
But you're not going to be drawing whether it's going to be significant or moderate.
I've answered the question, Chair. We are in deficit at the moment. We won't be in deficit in 6 years' time.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you. I had a few questions about children and autism diagnoses. Like some of my colleagues, I was going to ask about the high incidence, but I think the answer we've got there is quite clear, which is that we need to understand more. I was keen to know, I saw how the waiting time is being reduced at the moment from some specific injection of resources, and I wondered obviously there's a period of time when a backlog is being cleared, and I wondered what you were thinking would be a kind of normal waiting time for a child for an ASD diagnosis. I was also keen to understand how confident you think the combined service is to understand the particular challenges around autism in girls and how that presents differently. And also about the interaction between children with ASD and they're also having some mental health needs. One hears about children and families being sort of pushed from pillar to post, and it would be good to hear about anything that we're doing locally in our partnership working to help to address that.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in colleagues. We've done an awful lot of work on the response to those children and young people with mental health needs. We've got something called the Multi-Agency Collaborative, which is all a partnership between health, local authority services and the voluntary sector. And actually, that's been seen as a model of good practice in terms of ensuring that children and young people aren't waiting for very long periods of time without receiving some sort of support or a service. But in terms of ASD, I mean, it might be useful, Chair, for us to come back with colleagues from health at some point to respond to that. But what I will say is that there has been a significant investment in this area. And as such, the aim is to reduce the waiting times for diagnosis significantly. And I've just opened a paper and I'm going to look through just to find out what the target is. But whilst I do that, I'll ask Anita or Jessica to come in to give a bit more information.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're doing is we're seeking opportunities for budget maximisation by applying for bids, for instance, to kind of add more resource in the early identification space, and keeping conversations very much on the table about those needs that can be more hidden or masked in a different way, particularly when girls have autism. So that sort of forms part of the early identification approach that we're working to strengthen. And I think Tim's right. I think perhaps two of the actions coming out of this discussion are both, as I was asked previously, to kind of share more information about what that early identification autism pathway is, and then couple that with information about what the target waiting times are, which health partners will be really well placed to talk to.
And what I can add, just in terms of some headlines, and I appreciate there'll be more questions and we'll need to provide more data as a follow-up. But in terms of CAM services, they've cleared their waiting list backlog from 2019-20. As of the 1st of November, 15 young people are on a CAMS waiting list, and the waiting time is approximately 5 months. Young people approaching 18 or urgent cases are prioritised for assessment. And in terms of the autistic spectrum disorder pathway, there is a significant backlog, and as you're absolutely right, Councillor, the waiting times have been too long. And as of the 1st of November, I think 938 children are on the waiting list, and the waiting time at the moment is approximately 24 months. But there is now the capacity to to make 26 assessment appointments per week, which is on track to make 100 assessments a month. So I think we can come back with health colleagues, but the aim is to bring that backlog down and to reduce that waiting list over the coming year.
Thank you very much. We just have a short time left. I'm looking around, scanning, to see if there's any more questioners, and I don't see any. I myself don't have any more at this stage. So if there's no more question, I would say thanks to Sarah, Tim, and colleagues for attending this segment. Okay, thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night to you all, and have a very festive season. See you all in the new year.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next item for those that are remaining, and welcome Councillor Lee Parkway again. And for those who are remaining, the next item on our agenda is the Brighter Future, the direction of travel and performance.
Thank you, Chair.
In the interest of time, if an officer is speaking for the first time, can you kindly identify yourself? And over to yourself, Councillor, and your colleagues. And with this item, 5 minutes for presenting if you have any opening remarks. If not, we will go straight into the questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of open remarks, and then I'm going to pass over to Geetha, who will be sharing a presentation with you very quickly, but will be. So just want to.
It's unlikely to be.
Around about 5 minutes. We're going to try and cut it down as quick as we can.
Okay, I'm hoping to finish this segment by 10 to 9.
Okay, well, that only gives us 25 minutes, Chair. But okay, we'll go as quick as we possibly can. So I just want to quickly say thank you, Chair, and members for having us here. Obviously, you know that we're here to present to you today the direction of travel for brighter futures, and I'll leave it at that, Chair, as with time limited. Geetha, would you like to?
Thank you very much, Councillor. So the next slide, please. This slide sets out the landscape for children and young people in Newham and is providing us with a benchmark so that we have the data that's required from May 2021. Sorry, could you move on to the next slide, please? The summary of the Children and Young People's Joint Strategic Needs Assessment highlights areas where we're doing really well, where we need to improve, and what we need to do to make things much better. This helps us to illustrate where we need to apply our resources, and you've heard already this evening about the importance of prevention. This illustration and supporting information helps us shape what that response needs to look like. We're all about data, evidence, action, and review. Next slide, please. This slide is really trying to emphasise what is Brighter Futures. We still get asked, what is this? And we'd like to just really be clear that Brighter Futures has been set up to make sure that our children are happy, healthy, safe, can be ambitious and be resilient, but essentially to reach their full potential with all of the systems that we have in place that exist in Brighter Futures and beyond. Next slide, please. Brighter Futures provides important preventative services for our children and for our parents from conception up to the age of 25. However, our role is wider than that. It's about advocating, it's about influencing, it's about amplifying the voices of our children, young people, and our parents. It's about changing those systems so that everyone is child-centric, thinks children first, and we all promote that narrative, which makes sure that the culture of children being positive attribute to our society has to happen. It's everyone's business that our children need to have the best start in life and all of the best services. We have 37% of our current population are under 25. They will be 100% of our future. Next slide, please. This roadmap sets out the Brighter Futures journey. So we wanted to just demonstrate how our services are wider at supporting council services and encouraging and supporting the journey of the child throughout. The next 3 slides you'll see are in your meeting, in the pack that we've shared with you. So I will just swiftly go through them, but it's really important that we understand that Brighter Futures is about early years. It's about helping children to thrive, and it's about amplifying their voices. Brighter Futures are the champions of delivering the preventative services, and it's hoped through our preventative universal offer and our early intervention that we limit the adverse childhood experiences that our children and families experience. We want to make things easier for our children and young people, providing simplified and accessible information. Next slide, please. With the support of our digital team, we have been able to, through a whole council effort, have developed this interactive Journey of a Child web resource, which will be launched shortly. It can be viewed through a test site currently, but this is to enable access, helping parents and children know what is out there, what is available, but also what are some of those key milestones that they may need to be addressing for our children throughout their life journey. Next slide, please. Brighter Futures has worked collaboratively with colleagues across the council and the wider partnership to deliver tangible service improvements. You can see on here a number of those, and I won't go through those now. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides are also in your meeting pack. This demonstrates data, it demonstrates impact, and it also demonstrates the work that we've been doing right across the system to really shift and change and focus on that early preventative work. Next Gen Newham's information is also in your pack, and this is very much the focus of our participation, but it's also very much about the genuine co-design that our young people and families are doing with us every day to make sure our services are appropriate and delivering what they need, as well as meeting the outcomes that we have set. Next slide, please. Our mission to improve outcomes for children and young people is relentless. The next 2 slides are also in your pack that show the key deliverables that we have in our next 6 months. Essentially, we will continue to focus on our children and young people's journey from birth. We need to make sure that our children and young people's plan has at the heart of it preventative services. We need to make sure that we have not overridden or overlooked any part of that journey of the child. We know there are systemic and there are structural inequalities that exist for many of our young people and families, and it is for us to make sure that we smash down those boundaries and those barriers, and that every child has the best start in life, is school ready, and has the best education that they can have, so that then when they get a job, they can invest and come back into the economy in that cyclical way. The investment in prevention is more than just current funding into crisis services. It is also very much about the best that we want our young people to become when they become adults, because they not only will save the economy and our services costs, but they will absolutely be the most positive interventions that they can be in society. Thank you very much. We're very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions, members? Councillor Pepe.
Thank you, Chair. Could you turn to your slide where you've got the outcomes framework? I've seen in the presentation, you've got lots of activities. What I haven't seen is how far you've come in terms, you've been around for 3 years, how far you've come in terms of the outcomes framework. Could you just explain under each area what the baseline was in terms of the children and young people are cared for and safe and protected from harm?
Can I ask if it's going to be simple for us to get a slide presented back just for the viewing public?
Yeah. There are 3 key outcome frameworks of this section, which is happy and enjoy, improve well-being, reach their full potential. We all agree with those outcomes. That's not the answer. The question. The question is, where was the baseline 3 years ago when these were set, and where have you got to now? And how are you measuring it? It's in the presentation on outcomes framework, it's called. And
slide
the difference.
206.
Yeah. 206, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I start, this outcomes framework was set up only last year as part of the recovery and reorientation strategy that came after we had been through the pandemic first phase. So these outcomes were part of the 8 pillars that we had set out across the council. And whilst these are set out for young people, the happy, safe, and reaching their full potential are all part of wider council services. And the way in which we are measuring happiness is still something that we are developing at the moment. And so therefore, some of these are part of a survey, some of them will be part of data, and some of them will be things that we have got already benchmark data for. I think it's probably fair to say that whilst Brighter Futures has been in place for 3 years, when I arrived in January of 2020, we were in the situation where we were trying to set out those key indicators across a number of areas because they weren't being measured or recorded in quite the way that we would have wanted. And it's really important, therefore, that we needed to set out our benchmark from then. Of course, everyone knows that, and it's not an excuse, but everyone knows that in March of last year, we all pivoted our responses to deal with the pandemic. So we have got a number of KPIs which colleagues who work with me can talk through in their areas around children's health, around youth empowerment, which is our youth services offer, and of course with some of those critical areas like children who return home after going missing and may well be exploited and harmed. So there are a number of key indicators across our dashboards, but the actual measurement of happy, healthy, is something that we are developing as a corporate centre and in the council as a whole, because that's part of our corporate plan.
Thank you. I mean, it's quite crucial because there's quite a lot of money's gone into this under the present regime. And I'm just wanting to find out whether that money's been well spent. I know that the activity has taken place and I can see all the good activities taking place. What I haven't been assured of or can't see, and perhaps you can send it to us, because I think it hopefully is quite a lot of data, is where your baseline is and what actually difference you've made. You can do activity, but if you're not making a difference to the children and young people out there, then it doesn't really make much difference. So what I'm interested in is not the activity, which you've got lots on. I'm interested in how has it made a difference to children's lives? And I think because of the investment that the council has made over the last 3 years in this area, it would be good to know how that money has been used effectively for the transformation of children's lives, because that's obviously the hope we all have. And I can't see that from any of the data that you've provided so far.
Sure, and we absolutely, council, we can provide you with that. We have got, I think, just as an example, there was the report that we commissioned that's called the Foundation for Change, which is around youth safety. So it has set a baseline in terms of the violence and the youth safety agenda, and we are now able to measure forward the evidence-based practice that we are doing. That means the evidence and the activities tell us from national research that these things will have an impact, and then we are now seeing some of that shift and change. So we can absolutely share that with you. And we are also doing the piece that you've just asked us there, Councillor, about the investment and the impact. And I think that what we'll be able to share with you in the February when we come back to scrutiny is the actual investment to save and the investment that is about both financial savings, but also savings to societal implications and the economy.
Well, I mean, saving to society takes a generation or two in this particular area, so it'd be difficult for you to prove that, I assume. But what I do want to know is where you're at in terms of the money that you spent and how it's made a difference to children. And I think I saying through the chair, would want to see that in the next meeting. So whether that's, on these particular outcomes that you've identified as the ones you want to try and focus on, please could you provide through the chair that the evidence of that 3 years of investment. I know you won't be able to provide the longitudinal studies that any academic research would ask for in this area, but you might be able to provide hopefully some baselining in these 3 areas and where you've got to in the last 3 years.
Sure.
Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, sorry, sure.
Thank you. One of the question Quintin picked up on one of the questions that I was going to be asking in this area. I just want to know, how is this reported to Cabinet? One, do you have any KPIs that you report on, or do you report your improvements or your performance to Cabinet?
So in the council, we have a system called the Integrated Performance Report, which is, sorry?
No, just coughing, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor. In the council, we have an integrated performance report, which is all of the key indicators across the council, and that gets reported through to the corporate management team and obviously through our cabinet portfolio leads. So all of the indicators that sit within Brighter Futures are part of that, and that will include, as I said, their children's health indicators, the early years indicators, the youth empowerment service, and the youth safety indicators, and it's reported to Cabinet quarterly.
To help us to understand your journey and your performance, these are the kind of information that we would like to see at Scrutiny. So we can also ask the questions, because as my colleague has alluded to, the money that is being spent, what are we getting for the money? The direction of travel, we understand, and I do agree that there's a lot of good work being done, but to get a feel of the value that is added. So, and I guess the mayor would be holding councillor to account, and your chief executive will be holding you to account, Gita, in terms of this. So we would like to have sight of these data and information so that we too can do our job and making a judgment call on this at the Scrutiny. So
Sure.
Can we get this information, please?
We're very happy to share that with you, Chair. And I think, you know, that the February Scrutiny, as we understood it, was the more detailed, in-depth conversation, and that's where we will bring all of this information for you.
Yes, thank you. So at least you have some guidance on some of these things that we'll be looking for in the February report. It's very
Thank
nice.
you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Whitworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would like to comment and ask a question on the Next Gen Newham survey, which is on page 215. It's a survey of the young people, children and young people's concerns at different ages. And I was quite concerned and indeed dismayed to see that pollution and environment was 9th out of 10th, 9th out of 10th in the 0 to 10 age group, 10th in the 11 to 15, and nowhere in the older age groups, which is rather worrying, because if they don't get interested in these topics, their future will not be bright. And obviously the council has a responsibility to raise awareness and get young people involved in ecological activities, particularly things like active travel. And schools, of course, have a major role to play. So I wondered really what plans you have to engage young people more fully in activities around the environment to improve the environment, what they can do to, what they can contribute to improving the environment of Newham. Because it seems to be a key factor for the future, for the bright future. And at the moment, the young people don't seem to be very interested. So what are your plans for that?
Sure, thank you, Councillor. So I think it's probably worth saying that the older age group category, that the 16 to 25-year-olds were less in proportion in terms of the response, but still take the point that that hasn't come up as highly as we may have expected. There is a climate emergency, a kind of group and a board and a plan that's obviously been to Cabinet and signed off in terms of what we're doing. And within that, there is a number of things that young people are proactively doing. And so I met with the Pupil Parliament, which is the primary school young people from a cohort of primary schools. And they talk very eloquently, as you say, about the work they want to do within their schools, how they want to advocate and to, you know, do the stop idling and all of those kinds of things. And at the last youth assembly, we focused on climate emergency. And young people who are of the older age group were very, very involved in the conversation about what they would like to do to try and advocate and be much more like lobbying around the kind of shifts and changes that adults need to make. And a lot of that has been done through digital spreading of the messaging. Obviously, our young people talk on the digital devices. And so we're really pushing through the youth assemblies, the sort of social action campaigning that needs to happen. And our young people, there are many young people who are doing this. And I think, you know, perhaps, you know, all these surveys are helpful from one lens, but it doesn't capture what all young people are doing. But you're absolutely right. We need to do more. And it is absolutely embedded in our climate emergency action plan. And I can come back with some of the very detailed kind of lines from that action plan that sit alongside this, if that's helpful.
Just a quick supplementary, Chair. I just wonder, well, how many young people took part in this survey? Because I know there are activities involving ecology with young people, but it seems that perhaps they just involve a minority, a small minority. It would depend on the size of this survey. How many people responded?
It was 1,300 young people of all ages, and we had some parents as well that contributed to the survey.
A total of 1,300.
1,300. The survey ran for a month. A month, and it was in the earlier part of this year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hudson.
Yeah. About the outcomes, I'm just particularly curious about what specific outcomes are we expecting by the 31st of March 2022 and the 31st of March 2023, because it seems a bit woolly. So is there anything there that, you know, that we can say, this is, you know, what are the specific outcomes? What are we expecting?
So we have the overarching outcomes as we've discussed in the outcomes framework, but for each of the areas of children's health and early years and youth empowerment and youth safety, we are expecting a number of shifts in terms of our mandated requirements, of which I will ask Audrey to comment on around children's health. So things like, you know, birth weight checks and making sure children's immunisations and all of those kinds of things are things that we are mandated to complete, and our outcomes are about making sure children have the best health provision at the start of their lives throughout. So that's an example of what we're trying to achieve in that particular area. And then, of course, if I take the example of Youth Empowerment Service, and Lynn is also on the call and can talk about this, but our Youth Empowerment Service is very much about the expansion of the offer, as we had set out earlier on in the start of the 3 years ago, and making sure that young people are accessing those services at a greater number, that we are making sure that children are able to access return home interviews if they are missing or requiring additional support. So there are a number of things that we would be doing that are about the needs and the dynamics of the children that we've seen. I will just say again, though, that of course a lot of our data and the numbers in the last year have been impacted by COVID, because of course things like the youth hubs were not physically open for large periods of those times, but we were engaging with young people through the virtual space, and we were engaging with young people through going out into the community through detached. So some of that data is not what we would have expected to have been measuring back at the start of 2019, and of course that's because of the impact of the pandemic. If I could, Chair, just indulge Audrey to come in on children's health, because I think she may be able to assist with some of those detailed outcomes around health provision, if that's helpful, please.
Yeah, it will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you, Chair.
So more than 2 minutes, Audrey.
I'll be as brief as possible. Thank you. So in terms of children's health, there are a number of mandated checks that the 0 to 19 service are responsible for. There is a handover at the day 10 in terms of the birth of a child. And from that point, there are several checks that the health visiting service will conduct. And they are not just checks in terms of we need to do these checks at those points. They are checks that will pick up on early health problems. There are checks with parents around mental health issues that can really impact on how a mother can bond with her baby, that can prevent issues resulting later on in terms of abuse and neglect. Some of the early checks that the health service, children's health checks will pick up on congenital health conditions that can be fatal for children. So some of the outcomes that children's health are contribute towards can be life-changing and life-saving. In terms of the work that children's health do, some of the work that was described earlier by our colleagues in CYPS around the SEND agenda, we have a specialist health visiting provision in children's health, and we will work with those children before they have their diagnosis much earlier on. So we will work with the parents to skill them up to meet their child's needs before there is a diagnosis, and indeed after there is a diagnosis. So much of the work that children's health do is absolutely vital in terms of ensuring positive outcomes, physical emotional, psychological outcomes for children and their families. And those healthcare checks at the key points in the child's life are those, in terms of science, in terms of research, are those key points where we can pick up on those issues and are able to respond to those issues. Just really quickly, Chair, one of the areas is the National Child Measurement Programme. So children are measured in schools in reception and in Year 6, and we measure every single child in those 2 year groups. And when there is an issue with a child's weight, we will intervene and put an intervention in that place. Now, I have to stress, people focus on obesity, and that is a real issue, but there are also some children that have low weight that can have equal amounts of issues for children, especially if they're going to develop eating disorders and other conditions. So there's real, in terms of outcomes for children, that can be kind of vital. And another one is around asthma. The rate of asthma across the country is incredibly high, and in Newham, I've got the data here if I can find it. The number of children that have asthma is quite significant. I'm going to, whilst I'm talking, I'll look for the data. So what we have is a whole school asthma approach. That means there is a consistent approach that's age appropriate for children in primary school and in secondary school. And again, this can be life-saving because what it does is it skills up all the school staff to be able to respond appropriately to children with asthma, because there was such a high rate of asthma within schools. So they're just some of the impacts of the Children's Health Service in terms of children's outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're coming to the end of this segment. Is there any other member before I close the segment? Any other member? I cannot see anyone. So in the absence of any other question, I will thank Councillor Lee Parkway and Peter and colleagues for attending. Thank you for the report. It's a very good report. I, for one, have learned a lot, and I can see that the Directorate is doing a lot in terms of our children and understand where we need to go in terms of allowing our children to achieve their full potential, to be happy and safe and so on. So I accept that. Only thing is that we will need to see the KPIs and what it is that you're reporting, so we also can get a better understanding of the performance. We know what you're doing. You can see that you're doing a lot. It's only to be able to measure that in some ways. But thank you very much. So I'm confident that when you come back in February, you get that information and able to endorse to say, yes, we are on the right track. We're getting there. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
We will make sure that we have that information for you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for attending. Have a merry festivity for those of you who will be celebrating the festivals that are coming up.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Good night.
Thank you. Good night to all. The committee still has some other business to conduct. So in terms of the committee, we have approximately 10 minutes left before we conclude our meeting. So that takes us to item 6 on our agenda, the forward work program and recommendations. The forward work program and action tracker. Members of the committee will see that the forward work program and action and recommendation tracker is appended for references. Does anyone have any amendments or comment? And that would be on page 241.
I'll just point out. So the recommendations that were agreed today for the previous meeting will also be added to this. But one of those actions was for the KPIs for children's services, which were also delivered to the Children's Improvement Board to be presented to this one, which has already been completed in the agenda pack that you saw today.
Thank you, Richard, for that explanation. Anyone has any contribution, any comments, amendments?
No.
No? Okay, so is that noted?
Yep.
Okay, and item 7, the date of our next meeting.
I've got a question, Chair.
Yes.
For the 10th, it says members are provided the opportunity to shadow frontline social workers to be confirmed. What's the situation with that?
I was just waiting to see, sorry, Chair. I was just waiting to see what the current situation is with the coronavirus, to be honest, because I want to limit it's probably the best idea to limit contact at the moment.
So it's not going to be done at the,
I think.
at that date.
Yeah.
I would have thought the new administration might do it. I can't think of it before. Coronavirus and everything's going on.
I'll keep everyone updated on that.
Good.
Okay.
Good. So, good, thank you. So, for the viewing public, the question was about members being able to shadow social workers. And that is under review because of the pandemic. Okay. Item 7, date of the next meeting. The date of the next meeting is scheduled to be 23rd of February next year, 2022. Is that noted? Okay. Thank you. Colleagues who are online and colleagues who are present in the room, thank you for attending, and officers alike. Richard, thank you for attending. Janine, thank you for your able assistance. And we also have Jessica still online. Thank you all, and do enjoy the festivities if you are celebrating, and be safe from the new strain of the pandemic and the old strain, whatever strain it is, be safe. Thank you all for attending.